This is Don Doing Stuff, and welcome to the Roman Empire podcast. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Don. This is a podcast basically about art and travel, and talking to people about their insights on art and travel. And my guest today, he is an artist, he's a dancer, he's a teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jason Lucas.
Like air horns slept for days, right? Or like you'd be like, what, Jones, who? Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, primarily, I function as a dancer and dance teacher nowadays. And I split that time with teaching Krav Maga, which is an Israeli... a military, self-defense system used by the Israeli army.
Yeah.
And that's where most of my time is spent nowadays. But, you know, like I used to work 9 to 5 like most other people. And I got to a point of where I was very unhappy. You know, it was just kind of sucking the life out of me. And I was just like, I didn't have the energy or the time to be able to do all the things that I loved. And I got to the point where I was really unhappy. And I was speaking to my boss and said, you know what? I need to go chase this dream. And he was super supportive because he's a musician himself.
Yeah.
I always questioned him back, and I was like, how come you didn't ever chase that? And he's like, you know what? I'm kind of happy where I am. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But if you're not happy, don't stay there. It's as simple as that. We have a choice to go to work every day.
Yeah.
But what you do is ultimately what it becomes. So, yeah. That's me in a nutshell, if you want to put it at that. If you want to put labels, as people like to do nowadays, like, oh, you're a house dancer, or you're this, or you're that. Screw labels, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, you and I both met while we were doing Krav Maga. And I noticed that you and I also did capoeira.
Yes. I don't know how we worked that out somehow, but we worked that out.
You were wearing a capoeira shirt. I don't know if because I only did it for about 2 years. I don't know how long you did.
5 off the top of my head. I can't really remember. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
About 5 years, I think. Yeah.
It was
but that was a whole different life. Like, I don't even know who that person was back then. Yeah.
And I remember we were sparring in Krav, and then we would try to throw in the quick capoeira moves in between sparring.
It's true. Yeah. But then I remembered that I think I saw your name on your bag, and it's like Velix, and I'm like, why do I know that name? And then it came back around, and I was like, well, you're the dude that sings. Because it was a gig that we were both singing at, and you were, I think, a headliner or one of the other acts, and I always kept saying your name everywhere, and I was like,
yeah,
okay. And I was like, there can't be that many of that guy with that surname. So I'm like, are you the dude that sings? He's like, yeah. So, small world. So connected in more ways than one.
Yeah. You were talking about, like, labels and stuff. People used to always see me as the dude that sings. I remember growing up and thinking, because I've been singing since I was young, and I was Don the singer, I was Don the boxer, I was Don the whatever. I was always pigeonholed into something. And effectively, you're a teacher and you're an artist because you create art, and also by word definition, a martial artist. At the same token, I don't want to pigeonhole people as well.
Well, I mean, technically we're all chefs, right? We cook every day. We generally we have to eat.
Yeah.
But it depends on what society sees us as. What are we portraying and putting ourselves out there as? Like, if I'm always putting out dance videos on my account, on my social media, people go, oh, he only does that style of dance. But it's just like, people only go with what they know, you know, publicly. Yeah. But who's to know that I'm not studying salsa in the back, or I'm becoming a chef in the back, right? No one really knows what goes behind closed doors.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to stay open-minded, not even from talking to someone, but being the person themselves. So we're always constantly growing and evolving. So technically we could be whatever the hell we want. It's just up to us to put that out there into the universe and just allow for that to come to fruition. So I think I think it's just a little bit hard to box ourselves in and not tell people, go, oh, but I'm also this and I'm also that, because we could be endless amount of things, and it's just basically coming back to just showing little bits and pieces of your life to people, and then let them make their own judgment. Just
Yeah.
keep them guessing.
Yeah. You could be anything, really, and you could be a multitude of things. But it's not necessarily the I am this, I am this, I am this one thing. This one thing doesn't define me. And I wanted to talk about the parallel of the things that you do, that they do have a bit of a parallel. Because we talked about doing capoeira, right? Capoeira is both a dance and a martial art.
Right.
From memory, it started off to look like a dance because it was to hide the slaves learned capoeira so that they could hide the fact that they were learning martial arts. Is there a parallel between?
I could say yes as a really broad answer, but it's up to the person themselves to really connect those parallels. You know what I mean? Like, if it's easy to see that, you know, dance and martial arts can be melded into capoeira, or see that there is relationships to both, it might be a little bit of a longer stretch to go from martial arts to cooking, you know. But look, someone else with a different life experience might be able to go, oh, but this is exactly the same as that. But everyone's different, you know. So I probably wouldn't be able to be the person to connect that. But like, you could say, like, I got one of my friends, Popping Jack. He's a popper, if you want to put a label on him. But he also does other martial arts as well, and he takes some of those movements and melds them together. But is he actually doing a dance fight? No, he's just taking one of the aspects of the martial art into his dance, so he can start playing those movements, and that then takes another art form into another art form and becomes a separate art form, you know. So that could become something else. Hmm. 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 I think having the body awareness in general is really going to help the uptake of any sort of muscle, you know, or coordination. If you're looking at capoeira, I mean, you're going to need to have the flexibility from your legs through all the kicks. You'll need to have the rhythm, be able to play, you know, stay in jinga and to stay in time with the music, which can then help with the way and the speed and timings of the way you strike in Krav, even in boxing. And then obviously you got your hand-eye coordination in boxing, your footwork, all of that. It's relatable, but different flavors, as we were saying before. Yeah. You know, it's probably going to happen after we get off the podcast. He's like, oh, I should have just said this. This is exactly the same as that. But you know, if you look at okay, if you want to talk about cooking, it's not really cooking, but you know, your bread and butter. What is your bread and butter of boxing? You know, like, I mean, that's at a really high level. But you know, like I said about the recipe, you know, your bobbing and weaving could be one condiment. Your jabs and crosses could be your bread and butter, but it could be, you know, you might have bread, butter, and peanut butter. You know, bread, butter, peanut butter, and honey. You know, so all your combos could be all of that. You know, but it just depends on how deep you wanted to dive into that whole analogy. Hmm. I think they're intertwined. If you look at, I mean, especially being in the society that we're in with technology and YouTube. So when YouTube first came out in, like, like 2000, early 2000s, like 2003. Before that, we didn't really know what the rest of the world was doing. And this is from a dance perspective. Like, to be able to get that information, you had to go there yourself and see it with your own eyes. Or if you were lucky, there were some DVDs that were produced back then that were being sold on some certain websites for like a premium, because you'd have to pay for the DVD and then all the shipping. So back then it was harder. So yeah, you'd probably be like, oh, I want to see what these guys are doing in this country or this city, and you would head over there. So I mean, when I guess my first trip as an adult by myself overseas was 2008, 2007, 8, and that was to Japan. Prior to that was all like family trips and stuff like that. So it wasn't really like I was going out on my own. But going
is there a dance scene in Japan?
There's a massive dance scene in Japan. Like, if you're looking at, you can imagine the population of Japan. Japanese people are great at absorbing culture and being the gatekeepers of that culture. So you'll find a lot of Japanese people will go overseas to learn something, right? They'll bring it back to Japan and then they'll develop it and innovate it.
Oh.
So a recent example is, I know that there's a girl who went to Chicago or no, Hollywood recently, and she was learning a style called Chicago footwork, and she was staying with a couple of dancers there, and to really absorb that culture. And then she's gonna go back, and then she's gonna develop that even further, you know. So,
yeah.
But this is not unheard of. This is a lot of people like going like to LA, like a lot of dancers that like popping will go to LA, or if they like house, they'll go to New York, depending on where the culture started or where it was really brought up. They will go to that and they'll bring it back. So you will find everything in Japan in terms of subcultures,
yep.
Whether it's hip hop dance, whether it's swing, whether it's other
types of dance.
Yeah, other types of dance.
Yeah.
But you know, not even just dance. Like if people want to learn Krav Maga, they'll go to Israel, right, and they'll come back. And the great thing about Japan is their geographical location. They're so easy to fly around to different places, and it's very common for people to go around, come back. And when I was living there, people was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to Amsterdam next week. I'm going to Israel next week." And I'm like,
just like that.
And it's just like you wouldn't hear people going to these countries normally in Australia. Like it'd be always like, "Oh, we're going to America. We're going to Europe. We're going to South America for a holiday." But these are people going to study whatever they're into.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people would only have a few days, unless they're going on a working holiday visa, because Japanese lifestyle is very hectic. They only have like limited annual leave, and to ask for that annual leave is really hard, because they always have to be working. But yeah, to come back to the question, what you would have done back then is you would have gone to see what was happening over there. On the flip side, now seeing that experience of being over there, you're seeing what other people are doing in other countries, and like, man, I need to level my game up, or I want to now develop myself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who go to Japan, and I'm not saying other countries are any less, but you get a work ethic over there because people are always constantly working and supporting one another, and you're just building, and it's just a non-stop flow. And you'll see people who will train every day for hours on end, no matter the weather. They'll either hire a studio all night from midnight to 5 a.m. They'll go to work the next day straight after that, or they might be training outside in fall or winter, and it's cold or it's snowing. But that doesn't stop people. It's how bad do you want it? Yeah. So the answer, but they're intertwined.
Yeah. Did living in Japan influence your art? Like, did you go to Japan for dance? Was that just?
Yeah. So I was. I think I've been there like 5 times now, and I think that each premise was primarily for dance.
Yep.
So the first few times was holidays, like 2 to 5 week stints, and it was just pretty much going to the studios and just taking as many classes as I could.
Wow.
Trying to absorb everything that you can, and you would spend money just to take the lessons, but your body would take a physical toll because lessons there are like 90 minutes each, and you're taking 2 or 3 in a row. When you're young, it's fine. Like, the body doesn't really feel it. I still have this memory of one day where I took 3 or 4 classes in a row, so I was literally 6 hours. but it's not 6 hours of fluffing about. It's 6 hours of dancing. So by the end of it, you're like kind of like hobbling in the hips, and you're like, oh, I have to walk tomorrow, you know. But it's it's a finite time that you're there, so you make the most of it.
That's such an amazing work ethic. That's such an amazing, like, I don't think I've ever done anything like that where I've just traveled somewhere just to try to, oh no, I lied. I went to Seoul to try to make connections with producers over there. Less strenuous because I wasn't, learning movements and things like that. But man,
it's still, it's a mental test, right? You have to be able to connect with people. You have to find people. Like some people might just go to a country to see an experience, but I often throw this analogy out there and said, are you really getting the same experience if you're just going for a holiday versus living there? It's like the equivalent of going to the zoo and standing outside watching animals versus living inside with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're not really seeing or feeling what's going on until you're actually inside with everyone else.
Yeah.
So so the work ethic was there, and then even when I went back to live there 5 years ago, you just build connections and you start working with people and you start practicing more, and it's just, your art develops or should develop over time if you're being mindful about your practice.
Yeah. So you're talking about development in a technical sense, right? But in terms of I don't know what it is with dance. Did travel help you innovate what you do or innovate your art?
I think you get exposed to a lot of different people, different mindsets.
Yeah.
If we're talking about not just the technical aspect, I was working for an English school, and the amount of people that I worked with, there were expats from all over the world, and it was just really refreshing to see the different takes from different cultures be so positive and supportive to one another. And I thought, that's really different compared to maybe who I was hanging around before, and it was just like really refreshing, and it's just really changed my outlook on life. So from a perspective of non-technical aspect, you start looking at positivity, being surrounded by positivity more, and that really pushes you to go, well, there's support here, there's positivity here. What is stopping me from developing my art further? Of course, you could be sitting there and get all the technical learning and whatnot, and just practice. But if you don't have that support, which I think is quite often missed in society today, it's hard. It feels harder to do things, and when we get to that point of frustration, we're like, maybe I'm getting somewhere, but I'm not getting recognition for it. It becomes really blinding, and you're just like, hey, look at me, I've done this on Instagram. Hey, look at me, I've done this. And everyone's trying to demand for that time and attention, but no one's supporting. It's just like, oh, yep, click, click, like, click, click, click.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are overlooked, but I think you just got to keep going no matter what. No matter if there's only support. And I think the thing you have to remember is the only person that really supports you is yourself.
Yep.
Anything else is like a bonus. One of the books I read, I can't remember who it was. I think it was the Code of the Extraordinary Mind. One of the books. Got it on my shelf. But they talk about how, like, don't worry about praise from other people because it's fleeting. Like, it shouldn't matter. That validation is not necessary. As long as you are happy with your own progress, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Whether the validation is positive or maybe it's criticism, fuck it, who cares?
Yeah. What matters is that you continue to grow and you continue to build yourself up.
Yeah.
I like, so you and I were talking earlier, like prior to this, about instant gratification and I guess the advantage of something being limited. You were talking about in Australia they had a prepaid phone plan where you could, even if you had 50 cents in your account, you could make a phone call for 20 minutes. And what we used to do as kids was we would call for 20 minutes and then hang up call and then hang up at 19 minutes 59 seconds so that we could call again and we would talk for hours. So we were talking about that. Do you think as artists we should try to, and also bringing it back to the Japanese people that travel overseas and have a few days to do 5 classes or something, then just do back-to-back classes.
Mm.
Is that something that as artists or as creatives, that we need to do? We need to limit ourselves, or do we need to kind of give ourselves room to grow? I know that's a really broad question, but yeah, I'm wondering. Hopefully, you understand what I'm trying to get at.
Tony Robbins says it best: grow or die. I mean, maybe he didn't come up with that phrase, but he's used that phrase for grow or die.
Right.
And to be honest, I think we should constantly be learning. For anyone that knows me, I read a lot. I think prior to maybe the last couple of years, I never used to read books, simply for the fact that I would never stick with it. But something just happened, and I started reading more and more books, and it just became this trend, this habit of just consuming books, or ebooks or whatever. But the amount of success that is left in all these books, clues of success, I should say, that is left in these books, really shows you enlightenment towards different topics. And when we talk about uh, learning, like Elon Musk, I think, didn't know anything about a certain topic, and he wasn't professionally qualified. He only learned that whatever he did through reading books. And I was blown away by that. And I thought, you know what? What's to stop me from learning quantum physics, right? I'm not saying I know it, but I'm just saying, what does to stop me? There's enough information out there. We're in the information era. There is YouTube videos. So even if books aren't your medium of consumption, watch a video. If you prefer ebooks, listen to ebooks. But there's always ways to learn things while we're doing something else.
Yeah.
Look, maybe you don't need to consume and remember every word, but there's going to be gems in there for each topic that you read, and you might need a second or third listen maybe down the track, because only when you're ready is when you'll actually receive that lesson that you need to absorb.
Yeah.
So
there is a book that I read. It's quite a short book called A Real Artist Steals, I think is the paraphrase title.
okay.
And the idea that he talks about is, in order to create, we have to we take from our events in our life. We take from things that we listen to. We take from influences. And in the book, I need to remember I'll probably link it or something. But in the book, he says, ingest everything that you want to create. Ingest, if you want to be a painter, then surround yourself with paintings. Learn as much as you can. Ingest it and leave it for X amount of time, and then when you're ready, go create, because you'll create firstly based on copying or mimicking, and then eventually it'll turn into your art. It will turn into an evolved version of you. It will be your interpretation of whatever that art is.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at, you might be copying from one particular artist that you like, and it's going to be a straight copy. But the moment you start taking other influences and swirling it all together on the palette, it's going to come out something different. And I remember someone telling me that our artistry is the combination of our top 3 influences. So, you might recognize that, oh, this dancer does this particular style, and this one does this one. And you just throw it all together, and it may take years for it to actually come out. Or the styles, not necessarily the moves, but the styles that once they merge together, he was like, people like watching like, that's fresh. I haven't seen that before, right?
Yeah.
But then you say, oh, but he or she has done this and this and this, and it's just like, well, that makes sense. The way that they move kind of puts that all together in a really fluid motion, or however they want to dance it, So, yeah. But that comes down to learning. It comes down to practice and productivity. I think another good book is that. The Art of War. No, The War of Art. No, so The Art of War is Sun Tzu, but the flip on that by Stephen Pressfield is The War of Art.
Okay.
And the biggest topic on that in that book is resistance, right? So he often said in the book that the muse is always there to help us, but we just have to get out there and do it. We have to show up every day. But what we fight on a consistent basis is resistance, and that's one of the biggest things that an artist will face. It's like, I got to get up, but I don't want to work on my art today, and it's just like that starts getting into our head.
Right.
And if we allow that to take residence inside there, it becomes a big problem. It's like laziness. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have today off. We all do need rest from time to time, but if you make that rest too long of a period, it becomes a habit. And guess what? You become lazy, and it leads to other things. It can lead to depression, can lead to really bad addictive habits. Like, oh, I'm just gonna play video games all day, or I'm just gonna go to the park and just lounge about. When you should be putting in that work to develop your art. So know when the rest is earned, and take it, but don't overindulge.
I think one of the things that I was told was, be careful with whatever you set your heart on, because you'll get it. So if you set your heart on, oh, I'm too tired, I'm too lazy to do this particular thing, then you'll be lazy and you won't be able to do the things that you want to do. But if you set on, oh, I want to achieve this, or I want to create this, if you set your mind to that, if you set your heart to it, then that's what you'll effectively move toward.
Thoughts become things. I believe it's what it is. So yeah.
Thoughts become actions. Actions become. I'm good with quotes and stuff today.
That's the only way it went the refined version. I know there's a longer version, but yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you. So, with the dance, with dance, there is. I know that there's a community in Sydney, or I guess community in Australia for dance, right? Is it necessary for you to connect, or are you able to create if you connect with people, or can you just create, or can you just dance by yourself? I mean, you have videos online of you dancing, and I think it's you teaching a class. But there are other videos where you're just by yourself and you're just kind of vibing out or freestyling, things like that. And what works best for you when creating or when doing dance? Do you have to be with other people, or do you have to be by yourself?
I think having both is super important. And when we talk about being around other people, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom. It could be at a party. It could be at a club. As long as you're sharing the vibes, I think it's super important. I think my boy Chuck said something recently which really stuck out. And he was like, musicians play better when they're around other musicians, right?
That's true.
Because you hear something, you're like, oh, I want to play that. Or, you might think of an idea together that you never wouldn't have thought by yourself. Similarly with dance, or, other artistry that comes through. So you could be dancing by yourself, and ain't nothing wrong with that. Because if you just wanted to practice something in specific, why do you need to practice with someone else? Like, maybe they want to do their own thing. Perfectly fine to be separate.
Yeah. But
think about what comes together, what happens when you put two different styles or two different flavors, or people with the same mindset. As silly as it sounds with the whole, Infinity War and stuff like that, think about before the Avengers came together, right? They were all the individual people, right? But you put them together and become something bigger, right?
I was so hoping.
I didn't say because everyone's flipping on that Infinity War at the moment.
I was so hoping that you weren't going to spoil anything, but I have not seen it yet.
No,
I haven't seen it.
It just, if you haven't seen it, go and see it. That's what I'm going to say.
Disney's paying him.
Unconfirmed.
Unconfirmed. Yeah. Is it important for people to be at the same level of like technicality when it comes to dance? Because musicians, right? Because musicians, if one person, I guess the band is only as good as the least best player there. Like they have to
the weakest link.
Yeah, the weakest link, right? Like if you're jamming with someone and they don't know, a particular chord, for instance, and you go, I'll play this chord, then it kind of stifles the creativity. Is that the same with dance? Does dance need the same level of technicality when creating?
Yes and no, but we have this notion where it's each one teach one, right? So you might be specifically gifted in one area, maybe a little bit weaker in the other, and you might meet someone who's the opposite. But does that mean that anyone's lesser than each other? Nope. Everyone's equal, right? And I think we often try to measure ourselves against each other's ranks or level of experience. But if you have an open mind and being willing to take on whatever you can learn, you'll grow. Both of you will grow, because then they're learning by giving you something and teaching you something, and you're learning something that they're giving, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think As long as you keep that, no, you don't have to have the same level of technicality. But to answer the yes part of that, if you guys are coming up with a product or a showcase, it can be a little bit harder, and this is why there are auditions, because there's quality control, right? Now, if there's someone who's trying to get into Cirque du Soleil and they've got like maybe 1 month dance experience, it's a bit hard, you know. There's a standard, you know, and I'm not saying that people should be dropping standards, but it just comes on the context. You could be in the club vibing out with each other. You might have someone go, hey, show me that move. What's wrong with sharing? Nothing wrong with that. Each one teach one. But if you're now trying to create a product or a showcase, bring yourself up to that level, you know, practice hard.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get recognition for being carried by another person. You're going to get recognition from putting the work that you put in.
Yeah, right. That's true. With the whole connectivity topic that we were talking about, because you've been teaching dance longer than you've been teaching Krav Maga, right? Has anything spilled over into the way that you teach, or the way that you approach lessons with Krav Maga from what you've learned through dance or through teaching dance?
So to be completely honest, the Krav Maga teaching methodology is part of the whole organization and system, and it's kind of like intellectual property.
Oh,
so
right.
We have a set structure of teaching things,
yeah.
And this is to maintain consistency and quality. However, there are elements of, you know, the way that I particularly will stretch the class, which may be a little bit different to other people, but basically, yeah, sharing similar things about, you know, we don't have to do a lot of static stretching. I do a lot of dynamic stretching in my dance classes, because, you know, static stretching you can do at home. You guys didn't pay to come and stretch, right? You guys paid to do a dance class. So yeah, but to be honest, after what I got from the Krav lessons is the way that things are taught is done in such a way that it's easy to pick up, and that's often how I approach it in dance. It's like, if you've never done this move before, I can give you an analogy. Go, well, you've done that, so it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
And the absorption rate is much faster, and that really helps people go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I've kicked a ball before. I know how to kick my leg. Yeah. So yeah, similar.
So it's it's kind of like you connect it first. You give them an analogy to connect the movement.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Would you do that in dance as well? I mean,
yeah.
Are you able to give an example in dance? I mean,
so for example, like I just said about kicking a ball, right? Everyone's generally kicked a ball or kicked something before,
right.
out of frustration.
Right.
So to say, just kick your leg in the same way in this particular direction, and just do that while jumping. That's just an example, right? Without actually demonstrating it. But you know, how many people have kicked a ball before? You'd probably find that most people have kicked the ball or they've stubbed their toe against the table or something like that.
Right.
Like, it's still kind of like as walking, right? Everyone can kind of bounce on their toes, right? Everyone can jump, right? So if you just bounce on your toes, exactly the same thing, just a refined version. Everyone can switch their legs back and forward, right? Like jumping on the spot, right? So if you can do that, there's a lot of things that are built off that, and you just keep going.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, I guess we talked a lot about dance and a little bit about travel. You went to Japan about 5 years ago. Was that the last trip that you did?
When I was living there was 5 years ago. I came back at the end of 2014, and I think I went back for one more trip there 2016, so that was probably my last trip to Japan. And then after that, the same year, I went back to Canada, and also to visit New York.
Now was going to Canada and New York for dance as well?
New York, yes. So actually, the original plan was to go back to Canada to scope out living there again. And I was meant to go to West Coast, but some things fell through, and basically just changed the plan and said, well, okay, if we're not going to West Coast, I'm just saying, let's go to New York. It's like the equivalent of going from Sydney to Melbourne. It's like an hour-and-a-half flight, and the cost was like like 100, $150.
Cheap,
And actually, the flight was actually, when I counted it, I looked at my time, my watch, and I was like, that flight was only 45 minutes. I'm like, that was fast. So, yeah, New York was great. Was there for 1 week.
Yep.
That was there for dance, and it was just lucky that the timing that I was there was a lot of stuff going on, plus all the clubs. But yeah.
Yeah. Did you do classes while you were in New York?
Yeah. So there's a big studio there called EXPG,
right.
Which is where all majority of the OGs teach at. And they had a special event during that week where there was a lot of visiting guests doing a lot of workshops. So that was really great time. Yeah.
Nice. I didn't know that New York was known for. Like, New York is known for dance, isn't it?
Yeah, New York was, I don't know if you'd still consider it the Mecca, but, early 2000s, everyone was there, like, working hard to be noticed by, artists at that time, to be in video clips. Like, there was stuff like Broadway Dance Center. It was the place you go to be noticed, or be the place to level up your game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was your most recent trip. Do you feel like, and I mean, there's that thing about the travel bug. Do you feel like that you need to travel in order for you to, like, for dance? Will there be a time where you will need to, like, okay, I need to go to New York again, or I need to go to Japan again, I need to go to this particular country to feel recharged or be renourished in dance?
Yeah, but I don't think we should rely on that indulgence. Like, we shouldn't be like, oh, I feel flat, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere, I need to go somewhere else. I think you should go when you're ready. Go there with a purpose. Like, if I'm going there to seek out a particular teacher, or I want to go and experience something specific, or I want to enter a battle over there, then go for it. But I think just going on the notion of, I want to learn under this person, and not be mindful about it, it's a different experience.
Yeah. So it's less about, I want to go overseas and see what happens. I want to go to a particular place, learn from a particular person. Yeah.
Some people are like that. Some people are like, I'm gonna move there, I'm gonna get a job as a waiter or waitress, I'm gonna hustle at night, I'm gonna go to the clubs at night. I'm just gonna live in New York, and that's perfectly fine. But I just think if you're just going back and forth, especially from a country like Australia, it's expensive, right?
Oh yeah.
So think about, what is your goal. Like, if you're, I guess a lot of the more established dancers are constantly flying around to make their name. They're doing workshop to workshop to workshop, so they're kind of working. You know what I mean? To get around. So don't necessarily say to go. Maybe there might be some special event that you want to go and check out and go, okay, I want to enter this battle. It's a once-a-year thing. So, like, at the moment, there's Summer Dance Forever in Amsterdam. There's Step Your Game Up in New York. And the list goes on. Like, there's events in Japan. But go there with a purpose. And don't be like, oh, I'm just going there because I want to go there. Go there because I want to win, or I want to take this person's workshop. Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important to have a goal, or important to have a place that you're going to, or a vision, basically. Yeah.
Don't be mindless about things. I think you tend to waste time and resources that way. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go hang around in Japan, and I might take some classes. Man, you should be organized. You should know where the studio is, what classes are on, who's teaching it, where you're gonna go after that, how are you gonna retain that information? Are you gonna video it? Are you gonna take notes? It's easy to take notes and then look back at it 3 months later and like, I don't know what this means anymore.
Right.
Videotape that stuff, like, whether you can take the video in class or you video yourself trying to do it afterwards, at least you have a retention that way. You're like, oh, that helps me remember what I was doing. Let's try to do it now. Maybe 3 months later, you have a different take on it. Maybe you got mixed in with some other flavor. Like, I want to change that move that I was doing there into something else,
Yeah.
And that just comes through repetition.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks again for coming on and talking about your art and talking about all the stuff that you do. Do you want to plug your, obviously, plug your dance classes, man, plug your craft classes? Or do you want to talk about any particular projects that are upcoming for you?
Geez, there's a couple of showcases coming up this month for a studio called Crossover in Sydney. But basically, if you want to follow me on social media, Instagram is jasey.me, jasey.me, or my Krav account is jasey.kravmaga, KRAVMAGA.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, man, thanks again for coming onto the podcast and talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'll catch you soon.
All right, cheers, mate.